if you're trying to connect with customers using personalization, there are essentially 5 promises that you're making to them. The first is you are empowering them. You are enabling them to do something they could not do before. But in order to do that, you know them. You know something about them that they are comfortable with you knowing. Then you reach them, or you make it easy for them to reach you when someone opens up an app in that moment. And then you show them something that is appropriate for them, tailored to them so that it connects on their level and they can understand it. And then over time, as you get more and more information about what works for Barry versus David, you delight them by making that experience even better. So empower me, know me, reach me, show me, delight me.
Real quick before we get into the interview. One of the first exercises I run with executive teams is mapping their business portfolio to visualize the current work in progress and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. Now, without exception, every time I run this exercise, the gap between the current state and desired state is far wider than every executive believed, hoped, or even imagined. I've put the exact template to use, how I do this, and made it free for all of you to download by following the link in the comments. Go get your copy and let me know how it goes. Now back to the show. Welcome to the UNLEARN Podcast. Today we're joined by a true pioneer in digital transformation and customer strategy, David Edelman. David has spent over 3 decades at the cutting edge of marketing and digital transformation, most recently as a Chief Marketing Officer for Aetna CVS, where he spearheaded large-scale shifts in customer engagement. Before that, he co-led McKinsey's global digital marketing and sales practice, where he held leadership roles at Digitas and the Boston Consulting Group, advising top executives worldwide. Now David has taken his expertise to Harvard Business School, where he's shaping the next generation of leaders and advising CXOs on how to drive digital agility and build resilient teams. Today, he'll share insights on his latest book, Personalized: Customer Strategy in the Age of AI. We'll dive into the different types of AI, where and how to use them, the evolving role of AI across the C-suite, and many more aspects that he's personally had to unlearn on his journey. Get ready for an enlightening conversation with David on the future of customer strategy in the age of AI. But before we start today, let's go to the moment that it really started to begin for him. Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast.
I became the music director of my high school show. From just simply being a saxophone player, stretching and saying, I can conduct the band, I can learn how to write arrangements, I can do all that, let me try. And so it was a question of stretching myself into some new areas, working through the creativity of how to come up with arrangements for songs, but yet there's a lot of discipline that I eventually had to learn. There was a lot about working with the team, working with the band, working with the singers, and a lot of give and take, where even though I was young, and in a leading position, I had to respond to feedback about what was working, what wasn't, how to think about my style. And so it really molded a lot, not just about leadership, but it also got me thinking about the importance of music, theater, and the left brain, right brain, teamwork aspect, and how no matter what I did in my life, I was going to need that. I was going to need something like that. And I found later that marketing was an area that would give me that. I started out as a young consultant out of college, wasn't quite sure what I really wanted to do, managed to get into Harvard Business School, and at the school, marketing just completely resonated to me. Because of this combination of creativity, you have to connect with people from an emotional standpoint, but yet there's a lot of discipline in terms of coming up with strategies, looking at data, eventually more and more technology. So it kind of, that whole notion of creativity and teamwork got me going in marketing. And so I've had this through line in my whole career, which has been about the two sides of marketing, the creativity, but increasingly the left brain, which is all the technology and the analytics and all of that, as that has evolved over time. Why don't I stop there? But it just comes together all the time in the way I think about work and opportunity.
Yeah, no, I love hearing this stuff. Like so many people maybe sometimes just think there's only one way you look at things. You're a highly creative person, or you're sort of the data disciplined person. And yet, what I find again and again, especially on this show, is that people find ways to encapsulate, if you will, their creative pursuits into it's their being, right? So whether you're focusing that on creating music, you're focusing that on creating amazing marketing campaigns, writing code, being an accountant, maybe not too much creative accounting, but like this is it. These are things where, but there's a mechanism of sensing and responding. And that's another thing, just listening to you share that, is when you're in a band, it's so much of it is responding to the players that you're with. When you're in a team, it's responding to the team members. When you're trying to interact with customers, it's responding to the feedback and the signals that they're sharing with you and digging deeper. So it's always fun to hear people talk, about that sort of inspiration for them. And as you say, the realm we're in now, especially in the marketing domain, there's new tools. We can probably learn more about customer behavior, look at more data in volumes and scale than we could ever have anticipated even 5 years ago. And yet the whole emotional side of the why, the thing that the data can't tell you is like why people are doing what they're doing, is again also a fascinating aspect. So tell us a little bit about, as you started to unpack this realm now, like you've had amazing leadership roles at huge companies like McKinsey and then Aetna as well. Very, I'm sure, different sort of modes of operation as well. But, you're obviously been inspired to share, Personalize the book about some of these new technologies, AI being one of them. But there's also many different types of AI. So tell us a little bit about what you maybe had to unlearn as you sort of have got into this realm, even in the last, I imagine, year, 18 months ago when you started writing the book, like how much the world has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, I was very marketing focused, and my whole career had been focused on the intersection of marketing, data, and technology. In fact, in 1989, I wrote an article when I was a young consultant at BCG called Segment of One Marketing. Shows you how old I am. But it was also before the internet even. And the article forecasts what eventually became Spotify. But with a slight difference, I thought they would charge you a penny per song listen, and there would be a billing aspect to it. But anyway, I was thinking about it from a marketing perspective. And the one big thing, as time went on, the internet happened and all these AI capabilities became available, the thing I had to unlearn is that it's not just about marketing. It's about strategy and customer experience and everything that a company is doing to connect with a customer, using customer information to change that customer's experience in a way that that customer sees adds value. That's becoming more and more how we compete. It's not just marketing. Think about the brands that you're doing more and more business with. I mentioned Spotify, Netflix, Uber. All of them get better over time as you use them more and it gets more information about you. And as I started poking into this, I realized these companies have been around for a while doing this. Gen AI is right now happening, and people are very caught up with Gen AI's ability to create content and create all kinds of variations of content. But there's a lot of other pieces of AI that have been around for a while. And people now can take advantage of those capabilities much more cheaply and more easily. It's not just for the Googles and the Amazons of the world. So let me give you a few examples of this. One is the ability to test lots of different variables, lots of different things. So Shopify, who has a free trial and then tries to convert people to paid subscriptions, has about 8 different variables that they could change when they're trying to pitch you, Barry, to move from the free to the paid. And when you go through all that, it's like over 500 combinations. So they can't just do simple split testing. Is this better than that for Barry? Maybe on the average. But there's capabilities based on reinforcement learning, which has been around for a while. And one from a company, for example, called OfferFit that allows you to do massive multivariable testing. So it helps you figure out, you decide how many variables you want to test. It helps you figure out whether in your base of customers you have enough to set up sample sizes for the different test cells. It assigns customers to the test cells. It helps you get the tests out the door. After customers interact, it takes the data back, uses that to update the models, and then gradually makes smarter and smarter decisions about which combination of things should go to which person. Now, that's something Google has used, Meta has used for a while, actually, in their systems in helping you optimize the right ad that you're throwing at them. But it wasn't available to the masses. And now there's tools where smaller companies like Brinks Home Security is also using OfferFit for all of their renewal and solicitation campaigns, and they're getting incredible ROI. That is not Gen AI. That's not generative AI. That's just reinforcement learning capabilities that have been out there that are available now, that companies are using to figure out the best way to get Barry to renew versus David to renew. And so that's an example. Another example is the ability to write the code to combine information. So we don't talk enough about this with Gen AI. Gen AI writes content, but it also writes code. And you can actually have a tool that uses a form of Gen AI to read one database and understand its schema, read another database, understand that schema, and then write the code to combine those into a third repository. So a company called Narrative has a tool, they call it Rosetta, that allows you to do something that you used to have to hire consultants and take 18 months of outsourcing to get all your data normalized. And now AI can do this in a matter of hours. And so you can now combine your billing, customer service, marketing, sales, product use data all together so much more easily. Snowflake is using this as a front end for their customer data platform. Customer data platforms are supposed to be all your data, but it was mostly just marketing data. Now it can be all your data that comes into play. Pepsi uses this not even for marketing, for looking at all of its international operations to, in an integrated way, look at all the data on who's putting what on the shelves with what kind of promotions. Nielsen uses this to pull together data about people's viewing habits. So these are capabilities that are not the way we're thinking about Gen AI, but are richer things that AI can enable that are available to both large and small companies.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear these in the examples. I still remember one of the first times I ever came across multivariate testing was working with a company called Etsy in about 2010. And John Oswald and the team there were, I guess, pioneers of this method called continuous delivery, where you could ship multiple versions of the software, very small changes at a high frequency, like do 10 deployments a day, which lends you this opportunity to sort of have 10 versions of the application running at any one time, and then throttle, if you will, customers at it. And the tool they had was called Frank. I don't know why it was called Frank, but you could go into the team and it would have all the experiments that were sort of running at the time on the site. And that could be anything from, how they were doing the optimization for the booking shopping cart for people to purchase something on Etsy or not. But it was fascinating, right? And took months for them to build this sort of testing harness, if you will, where Frank would allowed them to do this experimentation. And it really allowed them to accelerate in the market and really find out through customer insight, feedback, data about when they had new ideas and they launched them in a controlled manner. They could sort of see, well, this new feature sucked and they binned it, or this feature that they didn't really anticipate was getting a lot of traction and they could scale it out to more audiences. But that was a very sophisticated technical capability that they had built an engineering team to sort of solve. But today, as you're describing now, like these tools are starting to become available in the hands of non-technical entrepreneurs or innovators who have the opportunity to pull these different tools together, right? Even the example you're sharing there of Snowflake, the dream of the single view of customer and who owns it, and all these battles that have gone on for years inside companies about who owns the customer and where's that data. But the ability now that you can synthesize from many sources into one place to get your insights is, again, a huge, powerful skill that's becoming available to non-technical people, right? So for you, like, how did you start to sort of get your hands dirty a little bit with this? Like, what were some of the tools maybe that you were like, okay, let me experiment here? Because many people will hear the promise of AI. They hear these tools. Like, is there a tool stack that you recommend? Is there, like, where do you think, how can people get started with this to go through their own unlearning process of really understanding the capabilities that are out there now?
Yeah, I think there's two angles to this. One is, before you start doing that, what do you want to actually do? So one of the most important things that I've seen in companies who have been better at personalization, for example, and using AI tools, is they start with, what do they want to provide as value to a customer? What is the experience they want to deliver that can make a customer smarter, get something dramatically more appropriate, bring them joy through new discovery, right?
Yeah,
and instead of just manipulating them and trying to throw their name on something. So thinking about what is it that can change your relationship with the customer in a positive way, then saying, okay, what data would we need to be able to do this? How do we have to bring data together? Are we looking for triggers out of that data? And if you go through it in a structured manner, and we talk about this in the book, you can start to see your priorities of what you need. And frankly, in today's world, once you do that, most of the tools you'll need are probably out there, many of which may even be in the MarTech stack you already have, but you're just not using them. It's astounding. I mean, I do a fair amount of advisory work with companies, and I would say well over half the time, the value is just sitting there in licenses they're already paying for, but they just haven't had the focus, the discipline, the desire to really push where they want to go in terms of value. And so that's just one side of it. The other side is start by thinking about something easy. I'll give you a really great example from my days at Aetna. So Aetna, big health insurance company. Health insurance is not anybody's favorite category to deal with as a customer.
Especially in the US, absolutely, yeah.
And if you ask people if they understand their health insurance, they may think they do, but then you actually ask them, and it turns out less than 8% of Americans really understand what they need to know about their health insurance. And so people don't understand it. They make mistakes. They go out of network or do something that's not covered. They call into the call centers. They're angry. It costs them money. It costs us money. There may be health implications. It's bad, or however you look at it. So, and the problem is we can't change the products easily in health insurance because there's so many legal issues involved and regulatory and all of that. It makes it very hard to simplify the product. So what we had to do was educate people. And everyone's health insurance actually is slightly different. So we found a provider, this is a company called Sunday Sky, that can create personalized videos. And this was before the big Gen AI stuff was happening. This was like 6 years ago. But they were simple animations, very simple, not elaborate, but they were personalized. They were drawing on our data. So Barry, as a new Aetna member, you would get a 3-minute video that would explain to you who in your family is covered. Do you have a primary care relationship? If not, here are 5 providers near you who are accepting new patients. Click here to make an appointment. Here's urgent care centers near you, so you don't have to go to an emergency room. These are in-network and covered, and so on. This was an absolute home run. It explained to people how the economics work. Calls to the call center went down. Net Promoter Score went up. People even opened our emails more often afterwards. So that was just a simple start of using AI capabilities to figure out what's best for Barry versus David. And then we tested different designs and we used multivariate testing to figure out the best videos. And so that was focused on saying, how do we want to add customer value? That was the key. And the biggest problem was people didn't understand their health insurance. So let's start with solving that problem. So that's where I go. Is it that people are overwhelmed when they shop you? That's another thing for a lot of retailers. There's just too many options. Where do I begin? Retailers have always struggled with this, but have they really thought about from the customer's perspective of how to simplify that? Just one more quick example. Cisco, the food delivery company, when somebody who runs a restaurant is ordering, it could be overwhelming what they could order. But the Cisco app in 300 milliseconds can know who you are, your restaurant, your menu, your price points, your geography, whether you buy in bulk, whether you buy on spot, what they have in their warehouse, and it's food and food has to move. So should they offer some kind of discount and maybe give you new menu options to consider in order to take advantage of what's on discount? And all of that comes in a completely personalized interface for you when you open that app up. And we talk to people who use the app and they're like, it's a no-brainer. It just makes it so simple and it makes them realize they're getting good deals. They're discovering new things for their menu. So here was an example of a company who took a customer pain point, which was placing orders for restaurants, and made it dramatically simpler.
What I love what you're sharing, though, is you're sort of exemplifying all these things together, right? And sometimes people think about marketing as just like pushing information onto people rather than understanding customer problems and then giving them the information to help them solve and understand that problem for themselves. Right? Really, really important. But then also sort of showing the important parts of how technology can be great at synthesizing and pulling data together and presenting it back to people once it understands what you're looking for, right? The sort of search query, it has the input fields that it needs. And then, what's the response is, addressing that problem or the variables that matter, if you will, to that customer, whether it's in the food business and they're thinking about product and moving it, or, as you say in your Aetna example, which is fantastic, is people, joining a new system, whatever that might be, and then being educated about how that system works and how they operate within it, in a way that connects with them, which again, really, really interesting to experiment with some of these sort of mediums, right? Even in the earlier days of, as you say, this technology, like sending personalized videos to people so they can feel like, oh, all right, I'm being guided through this. That reduce calls to the call center, that improve customer outcomes, that give customers agency, if you will, to act within the system. And those for me are like all great little cues for people to be thinking about when they're thinking about their world, right? Like, where are the problems that our customers are experiencing? Do we really understand them? Is always a fundamental, I think, and a question not asked enough. And then thinking about the tools that you say as you have within your marketing stack or even just your business stack in general, like where could we get that information and pull it together? And then the execution and the delivery of the information back to people. Is it an email? Is it a personalized video? Like what's going to resonate with that customer the most, I think is, again, it's just a good process for people to think about themselves who are listening to the show about how they might go about that.
Yeah. And just to put it in a simple framework, Barry, there's a framework we use in the book, which says if you're trying to connect with customers using personalization, there are essentially 5 promises that you're making to them. The first is you are empowering them. You are enabling them to do something they could not do before. But in order to do that, you know them. You know something about them that they are comfortable with you knowing. Then you reach them, or you make it easy for them to reach you when someone opens up an app in that moment. And then you show them something that is appropriate for them, tailored to them so that it connects on their level and they can understand it. And then over time, as you get more and more information about what works for Barry versus David, you delight them by making that experience even better. So empower me, know me, reach me, show me, delight me. And I think you actually said all of those without using those exact words just now. But that's a simple way of framing how you have to think through a strategy that's based on personalized value.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So thinking then a little more broadly, right? Like people might think, your background is as a chief marketing officer, but these tools are sort of permeating the entire sort of industry, right? All aspects of work. So what do you think maybe the industry might need to unlearn a little bit, or maybe within the company, what might people might start to unlearn about these tools?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things to unlearn is that it's whole marketing tactics. I want to come back to that because it takes a village to actually do this, to provide customers with better experiences. Now, it may be that the chief marketing officer, there may be a chief experience officer. I was a chief marketing officer who also had customer experience under me. They may be the quarterback. They may be bringing the ideas to the table, the data, the customer insights. But everyone around that executive table has a role. The CEO has to say, this is going to be a priority, and this is key to the strategy of how we're going to compete. Howard Schultz said in an investor call several years ago, we want to be the most personalized brand in the world. We're going to compete based on personalization. Now, there may have been some ramifications operationally that caught up and bit them, but that was a corporate strategic direction. The CFO has to be in the game because there's going to be investments, and you've got to think through what's the business case? What is the value we want to generate? Is it getting more customers? Is it expanding existing customer value? Is it reducing attrition? How are we going to make the business case? Chief legal officer, the general counsel. Oh my God, there's so many issues in terms of privacy, getting permissions. All of that has to have a framework around which you manage it. Operations in the service centers, for example. What's going to happen in the call center when somebody calls in about an experience, or maybe the experience is in the call center where all of a sudden now the reps have an incredibly rich understanding of who you are when you call in, and prompts already there for how they can guide you through whatever issue you have, and so on. So there's a chapter in the book that basically goes around the entire C-suite with examples from companies who are doing this of how different roles have to contribute overall. And so in terms of unlearning, just saying, oh, personalization, that's just a marketing thing to try to acquire customers through tailoring some of the content. Yeah, you could do that, but that's going to have diminishing returns to a point. And it's really a broader opportunity for growth.
Yeah, no, I love it. A lot of what you're describing really resonates. Sort of in, I guess, about 2016, I had the pleasure to work with the executive team at Capital One. So Rich Furbank was the CEO and founder, and One of the things that they were trying to do is they had this very interesting vision at the time where they didn't want to see themselves as a bank. They wanted to see themselves as a technology company that just happened to focus on financial services. And one of the fascinating things about how they went about it is they did it cross-functionally at the executive level. So everyone from the legal counsel to the marketing group to the people who are operating their business units, credit card, retail, whatever it might be, they were all thinking about what would it be for us to be a technology company that just happened to focus on financial services. And it was fascinating to see the conversations that started to permeate on the back of that. You literally had the chief legal officer sitting asking questions like, well, if we're going to create these sort of small cross-functional teams to work on new products, do I need to have a legal person in each team? Or maybe in some areas they're, a support to that team, or maybe they're full-time dedicated. And it was fascinating to see, a cross-functional leadership group ask those questions of themselves and debate and have dialogue around them as a group to say, what are we going to have to do differently to maximize the opportunity of a technology or a strategy that we want to deploy? So I think, again, this world is really fascinating because it's very emergent still for many people. And it's very easy for legal to sit there and go, well, our only requirement is to make sure, people aren't acting nefariously and shut things down, right? Rather than sort of saying, no, how can I be active in this and even think about what's the effect on my department, if you will, or how do I collaborate better with different functions to drive that? So again, what are some of the things you've found to help teams get started on that track? Is it finding a project that they can work on together? Is there areas that you feel is an education step first? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen help people succeed as they sort of go down that journey?
Yeah, sure. I love how you talked about the small cross-functional teams in your Capital One story, Barry, because that is fundamental. So it's taking something like we did, for example, at Aetna on the personalized videos and bringing together a cross-functional team. So this is another unlearn because in a lot of companies, in order to get stuff done, if you think about different software development models, there used to be waterfall, where you did one thing, then you hand it off to the next, then you hand it off to the next, versus agile, where you have teams working together with all the right people at the table doing fast cycle, test and learn. And we, in the work that we did at Aetna, we brought that into the customer experience process of saying it's not just about software, it's about developing the experience and getting the right people from creative, analytics. Definitely compliance was at the table. Our chief compliance officer, also named Dave, and I got along very well. And he realized helping to speed up the metabolism of the company in a risk-appropriate way was really going to be key. And so bringing together teams who can rapidly test and learn is very important here for a number of reasons, one of which is you get more data to feed your AI. And AI lives off that data. And the more you test, the more data you get in, the smarter the AI can become. And so there's an absolute criticality to increasing the metabolism of a company. So thinking about the cross-functional team and doing that. And then in doing so, letting people on that team have some swing in terms of roles. I think one of the other things we're going to realize from AI is that a lot of companies have gotten too specialized and people have very narrow roles. In marketing, I'm astonished at how narrow roles have become. And that limits people. It also means it takes 13 people to get a marketing program out the door. And that's insane. A lot of the reasons for specialization is because of the idiosyncrasies of getting something done, given the partners or the software that's involved. Oh, Google, in order to do search, you can only do it this way, and you have to know how to do it. Or for social, it's a different system to work with Meta. AI is going to get rid of all that. It's going to become a lot easier to do that as people get simpler tools to be able to get that stuff done. And so they'll be able to handle more at once. And you'll see people becoming a bit broader in terms of more general skills, focusing more on the thinking and the creativity and what's really happening with our customers and what are we learning from this data versus the nuance of manipulating some things on a screen in order to get a search thing out the door. That's going to change a lot of HR. It's going to change the nature of teams. So that's a whole nother area of unlearning that's going to be a part of that. And it's certainly something we saw at Aetna, where we went from 12 to 13 people to get something out the door to 5 or 6.
Yeah, and that, this is sort of a huge part of the promise. I love that you're talking about this issue that we've almost super siloed domain skills down to the minutiae, which is ultimately is costing time to get things done, which is always fascinating. As someone like myself, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, right? So but I can get things from 0 to 1 pretty quickly and moving. But there is also this sort of, inertia, if you will, in some respects, that we have to have this hyper-personalized roles as we get into these bigger entities. So it's nice to hear you talk a little bit about, using the technology to empower more of these people to actually get work done in smaller amount of people with broader sets of skills, supported with tech capabilities. They can get stuff done, and that's great to hear. So just looking forward then, what are you most excited about? You've obviously been digging deep into this realm. It's sort of at the bottom of a J curve. I feel like we're only really starting to, get more awareness, if you will, in the market, never mind adoption. So what are you sort of most excited about as you look out ahead?
Yeah, I think what I'm very excited about is the balance between doing cool things that can add value and making people's lives simpler, but managing it in a trustful way. And I think there is this tightrope that we are walking with personalization, and we have a chapter on the risks there. And I don't think yet we have learned about all the possible risks and how to manage them and the best ways of doing it. I do not think there are best practices. I think there are things people are trying. And what I'm looking forward to is more experience on that, of how to manage appropriate privacy, getting permissions, thinking through the right experience that doesn't make people feel it's creepy. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, because I think there's so much pressure to say, oh, we got to regulate all of this, we got to protect everybody. But there's good things that come out of this too. And so we got to show good things, good experiences that are happening in ways that are trustful and appropriate. And that's a key that I don't think we've completely done this at scale, but I'm looking forward to seeing more and more companies really cracking that compromise.
David, it's been great to hear from you. Again, massive congratulations with the book, Personalized Customer Strategy in the Age of AI. You were great enough to say today the book was on the bestseller list for US Today. Massive congratulations on that. I recommend people go out, grab it. And thank you again for joining us for the show.
Thank you, Barry. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.